5800X 3D at 4K and 1440p. This video is going to be following up from the main one last time and looking at those resolutions, because as some people pointed out in the comments, nobody really plays at 720p, and obviously you don't test CPUs at high resolutions because then you're bottlenecked by the GPU and you don't really test the CPU at all. But we are going to today follow up and look at what real world examples would be. So 1440p, 4K, 1080p as well, and seeing does it scale well across those resolutions. So let's get into it. First off, we're in Lawville. This has all been tested on the PTU. It's on actually the last patch of the PTU, so it's the same one that went live, so performance should be the same. And what's really interesting is that in the last few patches on the PTU, CIG made some more changes to the streaming tech that have actually really affected performance in the cities as well. So they've reduced the amount of entities that you're streaming in, I think, in your bubble, and it seems to have made a massive difference to performance. So as you'll see, 1080p and 720p are basically the same. The 1080p does dip into being GPU bottlenecked at various points, but it's not too bad. But at 1440p, you're definitely GPU bottlenecked, and at 4K, absolutely slamming it and getting an average of around 40 FPS, which is still better than you get with most. In fact, I think any CPU, most CPUs would still dip a bit lower than that, so it's actually still worth having the high-end CPU. Next up, we're in Area 18, the Plaza, and again, you'll see the scaling across the four. The 4K one is really blurry there, but it's saying 40 odd FPS basically. But as you increase the resolution, the display info gets really small, and so when you then blow it up to make it fit this screen, it becomes almost impossible to read. But basically at 4K, absolutely hammered, 40 FPS again, and we're kind of seeing that in the cities at least, or where there's graphical stuff really going on. You can't play Star Citizen at 4K and hit 60 FPS. 40 for Star Citizen is still pretty good, to be fair, but that is not acceptable to a lot of people when they've spent that much money on getting all the gear. And really, we're waiting for the next gen of GPUs to really be able to hit 4K comfortably in Star Citizen. And finally, we're in space with the Aurora. You'll see the bottom two resolutions are hitting still the same, really, nearly 200 FPS. You lose a few frames when you go to 1440p, and then about half the frames at 4K. Yeah, there's a scaling. I think it's really interesting to see that actually at 1440p you don't lose much on the GPU side with the 3080. It's powerful enough for 1440p, but yeah, 4K not quite. So what to make of all this? Well, the data kind of speaks for itself, doesn't it? 4K is kind of out of reach for a 3080, and really most of the cards, even if you've got a 3090 Ti or a 6900 XT, really we're waiting for the next generation of GPUs before we can really comfortably hit 4K 60. But at 1440p, this CPU looks incredible. Some of those frames, especially now with the new changes that CIG have made to the engine, unbelievable performance. And just thinking about how far we've come since my first time opening up the Hangar module back in the day, or Arena Command back in the day with my i5 Ivy Bridge, and just thinking we've come so far in terms of performance. It's crazy to see 200 FPS in space. It's just insane. But now that they've done these changes to the cities as well, drop the entity counts in the cities, or what you're streaming in the cities, it really is quite astonishing how we've gone from a 3.16 patch where performance for most people was pretty bad to some insane, incredible numbers. And what I'll be doing following up from here, we'll be doing some testing with this system, with this CPU, with the 1060 in, the low-end minimum spec GPU, to see what that looks like. And then also at some point getting into 317 with these changes with my minimum spec system with a very slow i5 8400. So it's exciting times. Performance is heading in the right direction for the first time in ages, it seems like, for Star Citizen. And yeah, this CPU itself is incredible.